Welcome to Truck Tech. I'm Thomas Wasson. It's a special episode where I go to ACT Expo. Got to talk with the folks at Prologis and WattEV in this special edition. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in the warehousing space, getting to talk with the Prologis folks. And for WattEV, not only are they building charging and infrastructure, but they have their own trucking fleet. A lot of great information. You don't want to miss it. It's all coming up next. Welcome to Truck Tech. I'm Thomas Wasson. Today we're talking with the folks of Prologis and Prologis Mobility. There's a lot of really cool stuff being announced right now, and one of them is in the form of modular charging. But before we dive in, let's talk to the gentleman who's talking to me. Henrik, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
My name is Henrik Holland. I head up Prologis Mobility. Prologis is the world's largest logistics real estate company. I joined the company 4 years ago after spending about 18 years of my career at Shell, working in different parts of the energy value chain, about a decade or so there in renewables and EV charging. I joined Prologis with the intent of combining the real estate development capability that Prologis has to develop logistics real estate, so warehouses, but also data centers, to combine that with state-of-the-art EV charging technology, hardware and software, to deliver full turnkey, easy to use charging solutions for our customers.
And speaking of the turnkey and end-to-end, one of the big things now is this mobility solutions. When you're developing these areas, infrastructure is a challenge. It takes time, but there's mobile applications. Talk a little bit about that. There's one of the big releases you all released this week about that. Give some folks a heads up.
Sure. So when we started 4 years ago, we very much focused on solving the problem of charging, and we very quickly realized that problem is to a large degree about solving the energy problem of charging. So getting enough energy to a site, getting it there on time, and getting it there at a level of cost that makes the overall use case for EVs work. So we spent a lot of time over the last few years on developing our modular energy technology. So what we just released is what we call the Prologis Mobility Charging Island design, which is a complete skid-based modular system that we fabricate offsite in a factory hall.
Yeah.
It's a skid that has all of the power electronics, the chargers on it. We fabricate it offsite and we drop it in at the location.
No, charger in a box.
That's right. And it has a lot of great advantages. One, safety. Like, we shouldn't forget in our industry that safety is our primary priority. We want to make sure that everybody gets home safely every day. So by moving fabrication and kind of civil work from the site into a controlled environment, you greatly improve your ability to control safety. Cost, of course, is another huge driver. By standardizing, making things modular and repeatable, you can fabricate at scale and you get the scale advantages in terms of cost. Then also in terms of time to deploy, which also, of course, translates to money and cost, we can fabricate offsite. We don't have to spend all that time on site to do the civil work. So we drop it in, and it greatly reduces the time that we require to build a location.
And how many chargers do I get with these skids? When it's almost like how Sears used to, you'd order a house and they send the whole thing and you construct it. How many do you get with this new skid system?
So the standard skid is a 4-charger, 8-port deployment, but we have various configurations that we can build. That's a great thing about modularity too, and the fact that we can fabricate in a hall. So we have various flavors of the skid. We have skids that have charging equipment, power electronics, storage, generation on it. So we can actually drop in, be completely off grid, and get a site up and running that way. And then we have a more plain vanilla variant of that, which is just the charging equipment and the power electronics.
And you can plug into the existing grid, and
Exactly.
but you're not having to dig through the ground and all this other site development like other traditional means.
Yeah, there is some site work that we will do. Again, depending on the location, we might do some trenching to where the skids are so that we can plug the skid in there. But we also can do above ground, cabling as well for maximum reusability and redeployment.
And how much juice does these skids hold? Is there a standard package, or can I get like the extra juice in terms of how much battery storage I need to feed those things?
So the standard package is 1,200 kilowatts for a skid. But again, this is a modular system. So as energy systems evolve, we will be increasing the power on these systems as well. So everything that we do right now in the US, it's, CCS, but also from a power electronics architecture perspective, megawatt charging standard ready. Not all sites will require that. So we'll be, flexible in terms of how we deploy.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure that as we develop our locations, that we are future proofing them and able to charge the vehicles that are going to be out in the market 2026 onwards.
That was one of the big things I heard, was the difference between the 350 kilowatt and then the 1,200 kilowatt, correct me if I'm wrong, but the megawatt charging capabilities of certain EVs,
right?
Very hungry, power hungry.
Exactly. Yes. So we've seen and we'll continue to see the power requirements on the charging side increase as the architectures of the vehicles change and we get to higher voltages, higher charging speeds. Again, we want to make sure that not only our assets retain their value over time by being able to charge the vehicles of the future, but also just that our customers get the charging speeds that they need.
And does this lead the way to eventually, so we set up the modular system, is there a way to turn it permanent? It's got to bolt it in the ground, or how does it lead to a permanent solution kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. So the skids could be there for a period of a year, 2 years, but we'll have sites where this solution is there for 10 years or more. So that's the great thing about this approach. And we've kind of borrowed this a little bit from oil and gas. I do have a little bit of a background in that. So does some of our technology team, where it's very normal to fabricate offsite and to drop in-site. So we're kind of taking best practices from other industries into the EV charging industry. So these systems could be there for a short period of time or maybe there for much longer.
It's like how big oil just build a road, they'll build it all, they'll fab it, and they'll just bring it in. It's that same mentality, but for these locations that are just not able to immediately get access.
Exactly. There are a lot of really great practices from other industries that we can employ. We do that on a day-to-day basis, again, with safety being the primary concern as we construct.
And speaking of other industries, there was a recent announcement with Maersk. You guys are working with on something. Tell us a little bit about that.
So with Maersk, we have a number of portfolio sites or projects in operations, and we've had the pleasure of being able to work together on the electrification of their drayage fleet across the US over the past few years, which has been a really, I think, exciting development for the industry. That they have been a great customer to work with, and I think have really showcased how you can, with today's technology, you can transition to EV and run a reliable operation. So these projects for them, they're not demo projects. So our projects, they're not just demo projects. They are real live projects that their customers rely on. So reliability there is absolutely key. We run our projects with a target uptime of above 99%, and that's what we're achieving across the board. And that's what we're going to have to do as an industry to convince customers and industry participants that, hey, this technology is ready for prime time, and your trucks are going to be rolling.
And when we're looking at that, is this a behind the fence solution where I'm just Maersk, I get to use it, or is this accessible to other folks as well? That's one of the big conversations I hear. Some people say I want it private white glove.
Yeah.
Some people say I'm just going to stick it in a public place. And
so I believe that a lot of the depot projects that we see today, so private behind the fence projects that initially get designed and built for the fleet that's domiciled at that location, or kind of frequently charge at that location. My belief is that over time, we're going to see that a lot of those sites get opened up to third parties. That's what we're doing with Maersk. So we have a wonderful site in Torrance, very close to here, the Denker project. It's 9 megawatts of charging capacity. And we are now charging non-Maersk trucks in complete collaboration with Maersk at that location already. And it's great for everybody because as the utilization of the site increases, the cost for Maersk goes down. As the utilization increases, the price that we can offer third parties also goes down. Higher asset utilization, higher network utilization is the driver of cost. So as an industry, we got to figure out how we get these projects that maybe get designed for 15% utilization or less sometimes, how we get that to a degree that's more like 20, 30, 40% so that the cost overall for all participants goes down.
And then I'm assuming as well it helps with the utilities in the conversation because you have a very large property portfolio. You talk with the utilities, you say, I need 9 megawatts. They're like, all right, I trust you versus people who do that pie in the sky and they say, well, I'm just going to buy the trucks after I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, utilities want to see that the investments that they make as well, that they get utilized. So again, it's good for all participants just to get the utilization of the infrastructure end to end to get that up.
And you had some really good data on how many miles of electric EV movement. Tell us about that. What's the number that y'all are up to right now in terms of how much is being used for folks who don't know how much market penetration and operationally this stuff is going on?
Yeah, of course. So we have tens of sites across the U.S. at this point, and we have achieved more than 10 million miles of EV traffic across these locations. So we've said 10 million. At this point, I can say that we're quite a bit above that already. And the great thing that we're seeing now is that it took us, let's say it took us a year to get to 4 million miles or so.
Yeah.
It took us, a few months then to, a much shorter period of time to double that number. So the utilization of the network now, as customers are starting to use vehicles, is growing at a nonlinear pace. And
it's the hockey stick.
Exactly. And I think that's what we're seeing in the industry as well. If you just look at the light duty side, just as a data point, if you look at the utilization of Electrify America, EVgo, et cetera, those are starting to ramp up as well nonlinearly as the EV adoption expands, and that's what we're going to see with commercial vehicles.
And is Maersk using these in the medium duty, the heavy duty? Are they like little yard dogs, or what are they? What's the most thing that charges at the moment?
Yeah, so the heaviest user of energy across that portfolio is the heavy duty truck. There are electric yard goats or yard hostlers, whatever you want to call them, there as well, and that's a great thing because once you have the infrastructure for the heavier duty fleet, you can actually use that infrastructure for your yard equipment as well in many cases if you plan that. So there's these ancillary benefits.
It's like a science experiment because if you have mixed usage between the equipment types, you got to figure out maybe certain ones like to be charged during certain times and you got to make them all get along together.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, what I think is really important is to think upfront when you're considering the transition of how you're actually going to operate your fleet and how you're going to manage your energy cost. So we do that collaboratively with our customers. If you don't do that, you run the risk of disappointment because you might not get the operational benefits that you were planning on. And then a pilot turns into a not so successful pilot and you're not going to do the next phase. Fortunately, it doesn't have to be that way. You can find partners to work that with you if you're a fleet operator, but doing that planning and thinking about, okay, how am I going to run this fleet? There are differences with diesel is really important. And then I think you can have very, very positive outcomes.
And Henrik, if folks want to learn more about the new mobility side and what you guys are working on, what's the best way to find out?
The best way to find out is to go to www.prologis.com/hubs. That'll land you on our mobility page, and you'll find lots of really interesting information there, including use cases that I actually think are probably the best way for fleet operators to start to understand, what the possibilities.
Get their feet wet.
Exactly. Get started.
Welcome to Truck Tech. I'm Thomas Wasson. We are at ACT Expo. I am behind a Tesla Semi, talking with the folks at WattEV. And Salim, tell us, Alan Adler's been a real staple at these events. This is my first time. For folks who don't know a lot about WattEV, give me the lowdown real quick.
Sure, it's great to be here interviewing you again. So this is all about WattEV. What we're doing is really a full solution provider to electrifying transport. Meaning not only do we build charging infrastructure, we invest in the technology. We've got an MCS charger right here. Can talk a little bit more about that. We also invest in the trucks. We're very happy with the Tesla Semi that we have. We've got probably the largest fleet of EVs today. We have 80 trucks in our fleet made up of all the different OEMs, really hauling as much freight as possible. We're doing about 75,000 miles a week. Over 3 million miles already traveled, all zero emissions, no diesel trucks at all in our operations. The MCS charger, just to talk a little bit more. So we've got two different types of connectors. There's CCS, there's MCS. A lot of the existing manufacturers use CCS chargers. It's what you see on your passenger vehicles. It charges at 360 kilowatts, takes about 2 to 3 hours to charge those trucks. MCS really changes the game there. Different connector, different charging rates. You're charging at 1200 kilowatts now. That brings down your charging time to about 30 minutes compared to 2 to 3 hours. Couple that with a Tesla Semi that has a huge battery, can charge at those rates, you're really increasing the range of what your operability is, increasing your utilization. So what we're doing, those 75,000 miles that I talked about, we're using those trucks heavily, meaning that in some cases we're doing 500 miles per day per truck. And that's not on a Tesla Semi, that's on an existing truck that takes 2 to 3 hours to charge. So we're really pushing the limits, finding ways to increase the utilization as much as possible, allowing shippers to meet their sustainability goals at near cost parity to diesel, and then also helping carriers and owner-operators get into it as well, where we're removing all the unknowns. We have the infrastructure piece, we have the vehicle piece, we also have the load piece. So really, the whole ecosystem solution.
That's one of the cool things I've noticed with some of the charging solutions is that it's like a chicken and the egg, but if you test the equipment, then you can help these fleets because you know firsthand. And so
Correct.
What are some of your early thoughts? We've got the Tesla Semi behind us. Tell us some of the trucks in your fleet and give us some of the early thoughts for folks who aren't as familiar with a lot of these new EVs that are on the road.
Sure. Yeah, so first of all, the drivers love the trucks. It's easier on their bodies, instant acceleration, instant torque. It obviously comes with a lot more constraints. Meaning that it takes 2 to 3 hours to charge. It's limited in range, about a 300-mile range for some of those other manufacturers that we have in our fleet. It also is heavier than a diesel truck. And then you have the unknowns of where to charge. We try to remove all of that by saying, okay, we have the largest network of charging infrastructure to date. We have another 15 sites in the works covering the entire West Coast. So really removing all the unknowns on the infrastructure piece. Then coming in saying, okay, we know exactly how these trucks operate because we've done it ourselves. We have a transport company where we haul freight. We know exactly which vehicle does what range, what the capabilities are, what the constraints are, and now can go in and give the best solution to the owner or operator. Yeah. So we can go in and say, okay, you have a route that goes from A to B. We can tell you if what truck you need, where to charge, and even if you need help with the loads, we could come in and say, okay, we can help you with that too.
Yeah. And looking at where you're placing these chargers, talk about how the chargers work. I've heard everything from private fences, white glove, to totally public. For the WattEV charger and the infrastructure you're developing, what are you looking at for size? Sure. How does it work?
Yeah, so when you look at the early adopters, a lot of them are doing behind the fence charging, right? So you look at those big carriers, they've all invested in putting the infrastructure behind the fence. Yeah. That works for that return to base operation. But it doesn't work for the longer haul freight that you want to do. It also doesn't work for many of the smaller carriers, right? Because they can't afford to put infrastructure behind the fence. They may not even have their own yard.
Yeah.
And then the trucks are also pretty expensive. They don't want to deal with that. Obviously, the trucks have come down quite a bit since when we first started. We think it's going to come down even more, and that's going to really improve it. But when it comes down to where we put the infrastructure, we obviously want to have it public facing. We want to have it close to the distribution centers, on and off ramps to the freeways, and then having access to power is a huge thing for us, right? So if you don't have power or it takes years to get, it's hard to come in and justify that. Yeah. The one exception to that, though, is Bakersfield. as well as the other solar sites that we're manufacturing. So Bakersfield, we came out with the idea of, okay, it's going to take time to get power in a lot of cases. Is there a way where we can couple this with solar and battery storage where you're not as dependent on the utilities?
Yeah.
And so in Bakersfield, we did just that. We've got 115 acres of land to play with, 100 acres of which is going to be solar and battery storage. And today we're actually charging some of our fleet on using nothing but solar and batteries.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool to see where like it all just works seamlessly. If there's a cloud that comes over the solar panels, you see the batteries kick in, doesn't disrupt the charging session at all, and it just all works seamlessly.
And that's one of the big things I was curious about. Do you all have mobile chargers to help? Let's say the solar farm fills up. Can you plug in a mobile battery and then just move it around to spots, or is that kind of a future goal?
Yeah, so we don't really need the mobile chargers. It's really just about building the site with the future in mind and having the ability to scale it up. So all of our sites have some baseline initial capacity that we've built it up and have the ability to scale as that demand scales. Right. So for instance, if in our San Bernardino site and our Long Beach site, we have a phase 2 happening now where we're actually increasing the capacity of those sites, adding more chargers, adding more megawatt chargers in preparation for what's coming.
And looking at any kind of events, releases and news, this is a big event with ACT Expo. Was there any cool stuff you can share with us from the event, or what are some of your big long-term plans?
Sure, yeah. So this year is really focused on scaling what we have today, building the relationship with the shippers, and showing that we can make the utilization work and make the total cost of ownership work as well. So we've been doing, again, 75,000 miles per truck per week in our fleet that we have today. We've been in some cases doing 500 miles on a 300-mile truck range where we're really pushing the limits of these vehicles, putting them to use. And again, you know, the next news release after that is going to be big, where we're working very closely with shippers to continue that growth of loads that we have, continue the site layout that we have, covering the entire West Coast.
And looking at site development, is there an advantage, I'm assuming, if you find a shipper, would it be easier to, I'm assuming, get some stuff right next to it and to get access to their existing infrastructure, or when you're looking to build out? I mean, California is kind of closed for land. You have to do some deals and haggle just to even find the space.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be as close as possible to that end customer. And in you know, the Southern California region, it's sort of pretty easy to do. You can come in and see where the distribution centers are. But as you said correctly, it's hard to find land that works there. I mean, in some cases, you'll come across a property that's great, but it makes more sense being a warehouse than it does a charging center because it's just so expensive for that land. Or you may come across a property that takes years to get the power, and sometimes we'll just forego that site and start looking for other sites. So really, there's a lot of ins and outs that goes into our site selection criteria. You know, obviously we want to be close to the customer, close to on and off ramps, as well as have access to the power.
Trading drivers, you all do end-to-end helping these fleets. Is there any kind of big things any big hurdles drivers have to get over as they're looking to transfer from a diesel to a
It's very simple. I mean, obviously we do driver training for all of the drivers when they come on board just to get them familiar, but it's usually pretty quick. I mean, a lot of it is very familiar. The Tesla Semi has center steering, which is a little different for some of those drivers to get used to. But once they're in it, it's completely fine. And a lot of the drivers love the trucks.
So you have like 2 of these now, right?
We have 2 of these now. We've announced another order for 40 coming next year. And we'll most likely be getting more. I mean, we really want to have trucks with the capabilities that we want moving forward. Meaning we want trucks with the high range, trucks with megawatt capability, and just being able to have that volume production to come in and scale with us.
And that was one thing I heard when talking with other chargers is the Tesla requires the juice. And so you need a specific one. Is that where you work with Tesla and you have to get like a Tesla licensed one, or can you just get a big old 1.2 megawatt and just plug and play?
I'm sure Tesla will tell you more about that, but I mean, what we've been deploying at our sites is megawatt chargers. I think Tesla has a great product. I mean, we're working very closely with them to see how we can continue growing that relationship.
Biggest surprise being a fleet owner as well. I hear things like tires and other things. Was there anything compared to having a diesel fleet that maybe folks need to take into consideration in addition to the operational constraints like your range?
Yeah, so, I mean, that's a great point. On the operational side, electric fleet, what we've noticed is that the maintenance is usually lower. And that's just because there's less things to fix, right? You don't have to do an oil change. It's a completely closed system on that. the coolant levels are completely closed system. The tires, we do see them wear out a little faster just because of how a driver may operate more aggressively, right? If they're more aggressive on that acceleration pedal, you're going to see a lot more tire wear. But we can sometimes reduce that, right? We can come in and a lot of the OEMs have built-in software capabilities to come in and reduce that acceleration. So you can reduce the tire wear.
So you could identify the driver kind of like the tortoise and the hare.
Absolutely.
And if he's having too much fun with that torque, you're like, hey,
we can see how drivers perform on all the vehicles. I mean, we're getting all of that data across all of the different trucks that we operate to see how a driver performs. We can come in and give them feedback on if they're too aggressive on the acceleration, if they're not using the regenerative braking properly.
Yeah.
So we're really coming in and seeing how can they improve and how can we improve the efficiency of the vehicle as well.
When we're looking at regenerative, is it just one setting with these EVs? Is it a knob? Do you dial it?
Most of them have an auto setting where it comes in and just does what it's supposed to do. Some of them have knobs where you can come in and control the aggressiveness of the regenerative braking.
How much, is there any data on how much savings? Is that like 10, 20% extra juice? Is like instead of a full 100% recharge when it's time, if I regenerate right, do I only have to charge like 80%?
It depends on the route, obviously. I mean, if I'm just on a downhill, you're going to see a lot more regenerative braking. And no tire wear at that point, or no brake pad wear, I should say, at that point, right? You're not using the brakes. It's really just one pedal drive using the regenerative brake. What we see on average is about a 10% energy coming back into the vehicle, which is a pretty good amount, actually.
That's a lot of savings because that's kilowatts. When you're looking at charging, one of the big things people tell me with utilities is the right time to charge. I think in California, it's like 4 to 9 p.m. Is that something where you're also having to coach fleets, or is it something where some of these guys just plug and play and they're like, I don't care, I need to charge?
It really depends on the routes. So the 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. is the expensive tariff rates for most of the utilities in Southern California. Meaning that if I plug in at those hours, my cost of energy is a lot higher. So it makes sense where you can to avoid those hours, a charge, during the midnight hours or early mornings. But in some cases, you're going to come across routes where the driver is forced to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at the drayage industry, for instance, the ports are closed from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. So that could be a perfect time to charge, but it's also going to be an expensive time to charge.
So there's already built-in mechanisms, but they timed it just right, basically. Type of loads you're hauling as a fleet. Are you doing short haul, local, drayage? Sorry. There we go.
So we're actually doing more middle mile now. We do obviously both drayage and middle mile. We're focusing on what works with the constraints of the vehicle. So a lot of our loads are actually within a 300-mile range. We're pushing that more now because the Tesla Semi has a 500-mile range, so we're coming and expanding that radius. But a lot of what we're focusing on today is more the drayage and more so now on middle mile. So about the 75% of our freight actually in the middle mile compared to the drayage.
And looking ahead, we're running low on time, but if we're thinking of, you've got an 80 truck fleet, given all the regulatory environments and stuff, do you want to grow truck count now or grow chargers, or is it like
It goes hand in hand, honestly. I mean, we're coming and saying, okay, with the network that we have today, how can we start increasing the utilization of those chargers? So we can probably increase.
Oh, shame. You're fine. So it's hand in hand. As you're scaling up, you're going to get the capabilities.
Yep.
Perfect. And if folks want to learn more, really appreciate your time as well. Folks want to learn more about WattEV, what's the best way to find out?
Go to our website, wattev.com, or email us at info@wattev.com.
Thanks again for watching. We'll have a few extra episodes here coming up as we round out ACT Expo. Big special thanks to all the folks who let me go to their booths and interview them. While you're at it, if you're just joining us, you can check us out on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube for Truck Tech, and sign up for the Truck Tech newsletter. It goes in your inbox every Friday morning. That's freightwaves.com/trucktech. That's it for this episode, but don't worry, folks, got a lot more great stuff coming up in the pipe. I'll see you again next week.